I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're talking about music, mental health, and the path to redemption. Former radio DJ turned prevention specialist Steve Miller has not only transformed his life, but the world around him. He is here to share his views on the power of music and the compassion in the face of sometimes overwhelming odds and how you can tilt those odds in your favor. Steve, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Peter. I'm glad to be here, and I guess to kind of frame a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, I'll share with the audience that music has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. Mom and Dad back in the days when I was growing up would put a stack of 6 records on the hi-fi stereo player there, and my job is when all 6 of the records had fallen through was to go over, turn them over, and put them back on the stack and play side B of those. Music has been a part, and it has influenced me, and we'll get into that I think later, but it has influenced me in a lot of ways. I did spend time in radio. I have a degree in marketing and spent some time noodling around advertising and then into television for a short period of time, and then finding my way into the work that I do today. But in regards to the music itself, I think a lot of people in the audience will resonate that there's a period of time in our lives when music really kind of is our best friend. And for some people, maybe that's through their entire life. But I think significantly, it's during that adolescent period. And I can remember how that switch went from listening to what Mom and Dad listened to and liking it to when I kind of first heard music and somehow or another they were connected to girls. And I think people will understand what I'm saying. It's like you kind of come into yourself at this time in your life. And that's kind of where you start to develop maybe some of your thoughts or your behavior. Some of your identity is influenced like that. I had long hair. It was into the late 70s and early 80s. The kind of music that I was listening to, and what spearheaded me into the work that I do now is that I made choices in my life based upon some of the songs I was listening to, the music that I was into, the kind of lifestyle that I thought, hey, this is cool, if you will. And so I never think of it in terms of like the music made me do it. But really what happened was I just started to believe in that kind of, let's call it the rock and roll lifestyle. And I can point to specific songs that I used as a way to kind of reinforce my behavior. And what that behavior ended up leading me to was basically I, at a very young age, became someone with a substance use disorder. And my life just spiraled out of control, again, it's not to blame it on, the music. There were choices that I were making, but nonetheless, it ended up impacting who I was. And I was presented with an opportunity to make some changes in my life. And what's significant about it is that I look at this timeline, if you will, that I was into this music scene and I was into making some choices that weren't good for me. But what actually turned the corner for me and where that kind of that aha moment or that light bulb went off for me when I was actually in the treatment program. One of the films that they had us watch was by a guy named Father Leo Booth. That's neither here nor there, but he told the story about an individual and how music had got his attention about his choices in life. And I was like, really? Music can actually do that for you? And I just started adding that to my life. Like, how can music help me to become a better person? How can I use music as a way to kind of meditate, if you will? And I just started doing that as a part of my early recovery and just continue to do it to this very day. And that's kind of why what we'll get to talking about a little bit later is I just really have had music at the core of my life in ways that were negative and in ways that have been intensely positive. And so I have my own little passion about how music really impacted my life, choices that I made, thoughts that I had, behaviors that I engaged in. And I was like, I can't be that different from anyone else, And lo and behold, after several years of, like I've already said, I worked radio and television and all that. One day I saw this advertisement for it was a postcard that came in the mail, DUI prevention, teen underage drinking prevention and DUI. And I remember thinking, I don't only think about this place, but that would be kind of a cool job to get into, and tell people kind of about how my experience, negative as it was, can be turned into something that was positive. And I had no idea what prevention was. I didn't know that there was, a prevention profession out there per se. I just happened to one day go apply for a job at this organization, and they were like, "Man, we'd love to have you on board." And that was about almost 13 years ago now. And in that time, I worked for an organization and was very fortunate to for them to say, do what you do, kind of come up with some creativity here. And that's how I got into bringing some music and art into the prevention spectrum.
Cool. I look forward to getting deeper into your story. We're going to take a short break and continue our conversation with Steve Miller. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzz and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
While a lot is changing in our world, at MediaCom, our focus remains the same, making sure you have the fastest, most reliable connection possible. During this critical time, we know your needs are changing. You may be working or learning from home, relying on telemedicine, or finding new ways to keep everyone entertained. If you need more speed, call or go online, and MediaCom will double your speed immediately for as low as $10 more a month for 1 year.
I think it's just vapor with flavor.
It won't hurt my kid like cigarettes, right?
Vaping is safer than smoking, isn't it?
There's really not even that much nicotine in them, right?
My kid?
My kid
Knows it's dangerous.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping, maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Steve Miller about how choices in life are sometimes influenced in ways we don't understand until it's too late. Steve, can you talk to us about the power and influence of music and sort of correlated with the sort of aha moment you were talking about, realizing teaching a DUI class that there's got to be more to life than just fixing the problem after everything hits the fan, so to speak?
Yeah. So as we mentioned in the first segment, I had an issue and ended up in a treatment program and had a moment there where I started to adopt this idea that music could be therapeutic. And then about 2 years into my recovery process, actually this same treatment program asked me if I'd like to come to work for them as an entry-level counselor. Well, long story short, what I ended up doing was I was a facilitator for the DUI program in this county. And I used to think, all these people, it was like a revolving door, just people coming through DUI after DUI, and the recidivism rate is astounding. And I used to just think, there's got to be more to this than like the DUI, and then you should make some changes, or maybe you need to get some further assistance, counseling, treatment, that kind of stuff. But I never really knew about prevention as a science, or prevention even as a livelihood, until sometime later, as I've already depicted, when I found out about what prevention was, and I ended up in that profession, and so I was able to kind of, like, my life sometimes feels like foreshadowing and then kind of full circle, if that makes sense. And I ended up into that prevention realm, and really being able to bring some of my passion for art and music and that kind of stuff into it.
Now, we've learned recently because of the proliferation of music. But it used to be you had to be near a record player or be near a radio. You had to physically put yourself in the presence of music or go to a club. But now it's become ubiquitous. You can listen to it on your phone. You can listen to it everywhere. And sometimes we have to wonder, I think, is the music being designed to attract people's attention? And we know that high-risk behavior like substances attract young people's attention. And we see more and more references in music to this kind of behavior, and not just music, video games, media, and everything else. Absolutely. But music is still a place where, like you, we find peace, we find friendship, we find things listening to music because it allows us to look at ourselves. But music may not necessarily be innocent anymore.
No, and I think that was part of what, when I got into prevention and started to understand what it was, and you start thinking about how, like, adolescent brain development and how, we're trying to find our identity and we're trying to find those. Some of the work that I looked at, there was a doctor that called them super peers, like artists, celebrities, mentors in life, those kinds of things. And those super peers are almost like the same kind of a role that maybe a parent would play in a person's life, but only more privately. And if we think about when we say privately, social media comes into, because that's a completely private relationship you have outside of your parents. And so that's when I really got intrigued about this whole thing and wondered, I can't be the only person that was listening to a body of music and justifying that, okay, I can dabble in this and it's okay kind of thing, because that's what the music says. And so then I started looking at some of the research and was just astounded to learn that not only does music have that kind of an impact in our lives for a number of reasons, not just around substances. Music's actually, for when you start looking at things like syncopation or appoggiaturas, which are like these hooks in the music that emotionally we get attached to, it's no wonder that we become so enamored with those songs that we grew up with. And I was the same way. And then I started looking more at the correlation between how much music you consume and what is the direct correlation between the use of substances. And what was really astounding was the more music that an individual listens to, the higher likelihood that they will engage in entry-level, drinking or tobacco use, maybe marijuana, because it's popular in music or in movies and those kinds of things. But then if you add listening to music and watching videos, it's astronomical, the correlation between heavy alcohol consumption. For instance, I read a report where they actually had a study where they would listen to music and then go out to the clubs. They knew they were going out for the night with college students, and they would drink at higher levels the more videos that they watched prior to going out. Kind of got them in the mood, a lot of the imagery that goes along with it. And it just kind of sets those triggers for like, this is, it's almost like, this is my lifestyle, I'm going to emulate this, so to speak. And then it just becomes this cycle that we can fall into. And if you understand how addiction works, it's not that first time you go out and have an experience with your friends, it's from reinforcing it over and over and over and over again. And that certainly was true for me. And like I said, music, popular media, I can think of movies, TV shows that I was gravitated towards, and they reflected that, or they reinforced the choices that I was making. And it was just kind of like, hey, this is what everybody's doing, so that's what I did.
Hey, this sounds great, man. That's just a fascinating look at the world of substance use disorder, especially. So after a short break, we're going to ask Steve to share some stories. Well, let's talk about stigma and something called mental health first aid. Stay tuned. We'll see you all after the break.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? I'm high. Oh.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
You told me not to talk to strangers. You told me not to cross the street without looking both ways.
You told me not to touch the stove.
You told me not to do drugs.
You told me not to drink and drive.
You gave me so many messages about how to stay safe. Why didn't you keep me safe by properly storing your gun?
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with Steve Miller about substance use disorder, mental health, and the fascinating twists and turns on the path to healing. Now, Steve, we were talking about music, and like you, I grew up with the Doors, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Janis Joplin, and there was a sort of a prevalent drug culture and use period there in life. But, you know, I'm a lot older now. I don't do drugs and haven't for a while, and I still love the same music. So it's not necessarily the music that does it. There's this huge other sort of cultural experience. Talk about that a little bit and how you've incorporated that into your talks about stigma and mental health first aid.
Well, you know, and when you talk about that, I've prefaced that anytime I've spoken publicly about, you know, this work that I've looked into is it's not to blame the artist. It's not to blame the music. It's not like that has any direct ownership. You know, there's actually a song lyric that I like. It's not the alcohol to blame. It just gave me the permission to do it. You know, it was like lowered inhibitions and things like that. That has nothing to do with music being bad. And I mean, I can share that because, you know, the song that I referenced as far as, you know, like it turned me on, if you will, was a song that was actually about trying to save someone who was out of control. But I took it in a different way. And Peter, you would know Leonard Skinner's That Smell.
Oh, yeah.
I took it as a pro type message when it's actually Ronnie Van Zant's attempt at his bandmate to get his life under control because he was completely out of control at that time. And so it wasn't until years later when I looked at context and lyrics and stuff like that and began to realize, you know, if we really aren't aware of what we're exposing ourselves to, we can make wrong choices or we can be influenced in negative ways. And I think that is what's at the heart of what we call media literacy in the work that I do. And I know that you're familiar with that, is understanding we're the target for the music industry, for the television, for the movie industry. They're trying to sell a product. And it's not about labeling or stigmatizing rock and roll music or country music or this kind of movie or that kind of. It's not about putting a blame on that or putting a stigma on it. It's about being realistic that we have to understand we're the ones that's being targeted and understand the message and then make choices accordingly.
Now, how do you counsel a kid where, you know, we've got issues of brain development, we got issues of I want to be rebellious and I want to do stuff. How do you make that sensible for like teens, and how would parents make that sensible for teens?
Well, I think the important thing is and it would be really an interesting study to do. But, you know, you and I were talking about before we came back on from the break that you grew up with your parents listening to Lawrence Welk. You know, I would have a hard time thinking that I would have sat down with my grandmother and had a conversation about that music. But I think that when it comes to music or TV or the movies or the social media that we consume, the important part here is that we sit down with, let's just use the adage, an open mind, and talk about what are the things that our young people are being exposed to or are interested in. As an adult or as a parent, I don't have to like it. I just have to appreciate that they're going through the same experience that I went through myself one time. and that they're finding themselves through this popular culture that we live in, much the same way that I did. My job as the adult or as the parent is to help illustrate that, well, now, why do you think that's what's being said here? Or why do you think that's being portrayed here? When as an adult, maybe it's being portrayed in this manner. And how I explain that is, it's this little part of brain development called the prefrontal cortex. It's really when we get to a certain age where we really are able to look at the world around us and kind of decipher it and understand with a different type of judgment or awareness that when we're growing up, we don't see it in such a manner. So we need that adult or that grown-up guidance to help navigate this time of life for an adolescent now. It's no different than when I was a kid, when you were a kid, when your parents were a kid. I think that the world is much more sophisticated. And I think that what we really need to do is have those conversations about things that young people are interested in. I mean, I have neighbors around me now, and I want to know at their young age, what are they listening to and what are they into and why do they like it, and not judge it, because that's what they did when I was a kid, and you just kind of tune it out. And I'm not interested in that. I want them to know that they're being heard. I don't want them to make bad choices. I don't want them to be harmed, but I want to understand why they're interested in this kind of stuff.
So now we have this whole new ubiquitous environment where people can listen to music 24/7 if they like.
Yeah.
I mean, a cell phone gives people access to everything all the time. Do you think that, we sort of know young kids don't want to be targeted. They don't want to be manipulated. But do we think that there's been a trend as media has gotten bigger in people's lives in terms of how much time they spend in it, that the media is actually being used to influence bad behavior like alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and pharmaceuticals, things like that?
I think that there probably is a correlation with all of that, because it's not, I can't say that anybody's malicious or there's an intent to do it, but we understand how music and video imagery and the words that we use all work together to sell a product. And that product could be a standalone song by your favorite artist, or it could be that they put that song in a movie or they put that song in the television commercial. It really all kind of goes together. And we really need to understand that these are just things that are designed to sell the world around us, if you will.
We're going to take a short break. And after that, we're going to invite Steve to share some final comments, insights, and advice, stuff that might really help you understand this world of music and high-risk behavior. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible. Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At MediaCom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power, and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about music, mental health, substance use disorder, and the fascinating journey of healing that's building hope and inspiration in our communities. Let's see what advice Steve has to share.
Well, thanks, Peter. I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you. And, if I think about, what would I leave the audience with as far as pondering, I've already kind of touched on that. I mean, one of the things that I know in the realm of both, treatment, recovery, and then into prevention is that that we don't talk enough as a family or as a community about our family and our community, if you will. And how can we bring that into this discussion, especially with music? Because I know as an older person, I still enjoy music. And I know that young people coming up are finding music. And it's like, how do we find that common ground with one another? And, we just used the term stigma just briefly, but really stigma is a judgment that says, I don't understand that, so I'm going to label it in some way or another. But that's just to dismiss what might be an entry point to having a conversation with someone that could be life-changing. Somebody being heard is more important than someone being dismissed. And I think that the common denominator is I've really met very few people that say, I really don't like music. And I think that it opens the door for us to have that kind of a conversation about why we like these things. I'm in a presentation that I do, I say, we study the classics, we study, Shakespeare and classical poetry and stuff like that. Why don't we study Snoop Dogg or, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts or Miley Cyrus, whatever it happens to be? What is being said by these prolific people that have our ears, that are captivating our eyes and our minds? Why don't we listen to the message that they're sharing and try to understand, is it right for me? I mean, that's a really valuable question, whether you're 6 or 60. What I'm looking at, what I'm doing with my life, is it right for me? And if we can just stop and ask that question, then we can probably save ourselves and some other people some missteps along the way. So, that's what I would always tell people is have a conversation about it. Why do you like it? Why do you love it? Why do you still listen to it? And not just the music and the way it makes you feel, but what is it being said? Because some of the research that I did indicated, a lot of people will say, well, I don't even listen to the lyrics. Well, subconsciously, and a lot of people don't go there, but subconsciously, we know what's being said. And it's a product that's being sold. So sit down and think, do I want to be that product? Do I want to be that consumer? And if the answer is no, then enjoy the music for what it is. You alluded to that. Hey, I grew up in a time period, but I don't do that anymore. Well, let's just circumvent that. Why do we need to do that to begin with? Why can't we just enjoy the music around us and just be ourselves? So
that's a great message, Steve. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all for joining us today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org, and keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.